Welcome to the Miller Report. Our special guest who's here with us today is an expert on the Middle East, on Iran, and on Israel. And before we talk to him, I would like to take this moment, a few moments, to tell my story about what happened to me on September 11th, because it is a memory for all of us in a day that we shall never forget. It was the first day of school. I walked my son to kindergarten. My daughter boarded her bus, and my husband, Robert, went to his office in the World Trade Center. Minutes later, chaos erupted. People were sprinting towards me, something about a plane. At first, I thought it was a small plane, maybe an accident. Then I looked up, and I saw black smoke and people jumping. I saw what I thought were white kites in the air, but they were people. I called Robert. "You have to leave," but he refused. He said patients were waiting. I knew he needed his medication to survive his recent diagnosis of brain cancer. So I ran 12 flights up to our apartment, grabbed his pills, and rushed back out, just in time to see the second plane slam into the second tower. That blast knocked me down. Dust choked the air. A stranger pressed his shirt to my face just so I could breathe. Evacuations swept us onto boats across the Hudson. People were jumping in the Hudson River. Hours of desperate calls later, Robert finally answered. He had escaped. He walked miles covered in ash and blood, but he was alive. That night, huddled in our basement with friends, I thought, if this couldn't kill him, how could cancer? Unfortunately, he did die 6 months later. But I'm telling this story because as bad as it was then, we were united. Us New Yorkers band together. We were together. We would never have thought 25 years later that this city would be as separate and divided as we were, and that we would ever consider electing a mayor who denounced this, who would ever not agree that terrorism has no place in our city. And this is the best city in the world. I believe in capitalism, and New York is the greatest city in the world. And now I'm going to talk to our guest, our specialist in Iran and the Middle East. Thank you. Thank you for sitting through my story, but I thought it was very important because it's where we are today.
Thank you so much for having me on your show, Suzanne, and thank you for sharing that testimony. I was not born and raised in London, but I was 6 years old at the time of the 9/11, and it was certainly one of the most haunting images in my early years and one of my earliest memories, unfortunately, of the United States. But combined with that, I remember the unbelievable bravery of the firefighters and the NYPD and just everyday citizens who came together, as you mentioned, and that was one of the most extraordinary takeaways from that horrific event.
Well, I think that if you talk to people, it seems to be a point of conversation. Where were you on September 11th? Where were you on September 11th? And I think it's important because so many people want to get to know me. I talk to other guests and I hear their stories, so I thought this was a good time that I celebrated the life that we had and the horrific times that hope we never see again here in New York. And welcome to the Miller Report.
Thank you.
So I understand you're writing a book, you wrote a book, and it's called Unveiled, and it's going to come out September 25th. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So what motivated you to write a book? And it's about the Middle East, as we know. We'll get into the details, but what motivated you to do this?
I've always been fascinated by the Middle East, by Israel, by Iran, by tensions, by possibilities of collaboration. My family comes from Israel and Iran, so I was surrounded by Hebrew, Persian, amazing cuisine, culture, history, and I was always fascinated by why there was so much tension between these two countries, because there has been a history of alliance and so much beauty in each of these civilizations. But of course, for the past 46 years, we've seen a very different Iran emerge, one that's governed, controlled by the Islamic Republic. And what I wanted to do in writing this book, Unveiled Inside Iran's Women Life Freedom Revolt, was pay tribute to the thousands and thousands of Iranian men and women and young people and more senior people who've paid the ultimate price in their quest for freedom. And I pay special attention to an unbelievable uprising that took place in 2022, 2023, after the killing of a young Iranian Kurdish woman whose name was Mahsa Amini. She was killed by the country's morality police, and her death sparked a massive uprising inside Iran and also a global wave of international solidarity as well. So this is really a spotlight on what took place then and the country's broader history of protests.
So I did read the book, and I had the privilege of also interviewing you out in Sag Harbor. So this is not my first go-around with it. I do know about it. Thank you for coming back on. Just to let my audience know what happened. So here's this woman who travels to Iran, and she is Tehran, and she's wearing her hijab a little loosely. So it's not on properly, and they get upset with her. She gets arrested only because her hijab is not on properly, and they torture her to the point that they kill her alive. Can you tell that story about what happened that day and why this movement happened? Because she was an innocent woman who really wasn't doing anything wrong.
She absolutely wasn't doing anything wrong, and her experience was something that many, many scores of Iranian women had experienced as well. So on September the 13th, 2022, this young woman, Mahsa Amini, is traveling to Tehran with her relatives. As she leaves the metro station, she's stopped by a few officers from the morality police, which has been enforced since the early 2000s to enforce the country's strict regulations of what you wear and what you do. And she was accused of wearing her headscarf inappropriately. She was arrested, beaten to a pulp, taken to a re-education centre, and she fell into a coma. 3 days later, on September the 16th, after having been declared brain dead, she died. And people, because so many other people had experienced these kinds of horrific this horrific violence from the morality police and the regime more broadly, I think it resonated with so many people inside Iran. And that's what really sparked a massive wave of protest in almost all of Iran's 31 provinces. And it stretched out into 2023 as well. And we saw voices of support in the halls of power worldwide, from Downing Street in London to the White House to the UN, all the way to Sydney in Canada, and it was a really remarkable coming together of support. Unfortunately, the movement ended up not toppling the Islamic Republic. The Islamic Republic, of course, still remains to this day, but it did chart some significant successes.
Why don't you think it worked?
I don't think it works because, for a number of reasons. The first is because the Islamic Republic itself came about as a result of a revolution in 1979, which means, and since then it's dealt and addressed many waves of uprising with unrelenting violence and arrests and executions and disappearances. All that's to say that it knows what it takes to create a revolution and also what it takes to stop one, and it has no problem brutalizing its own people. So at that time, it arrested and killed many women and men and executed, and some are still being executed to this day for their role. That was one aspect because of this brutality, but also because I don't think there was sustained international support for this movement by different Western governments. There were expressions of solidarity that we see even to this day, but those expressions weren't followed by tangible actions. By tangible actions, I mean, enforced sanctions on the Islamic Republic and different measures being taken to debilitate the regime and to support the people of Iran.
So has the United Nations done anything to address the Islamic Republic's domestic issues now?
It does very little. It took a few measures. For example, the most recent was E3, some of the leading members in the member states in Europe, including the UK and France and Germany, decided to reimpose sanctions on the Islamic Republic because they weren't complying by their nuclear obligations, and because they weren't coming to the table and they weren't forthright about their nuclear program. But whether or not that gets enforced, whether or not the IAEA is given access again into these facilities remains a different question. We've seen, if the past is any sign, the Islamic Republic is very good at saying that it's going to comply and that it's going to come to the negotiating table, while also doing more sinister things behind the scenes. So I think you need to judge the Islamic Republic by their actions much more than by their words.
I've read that they're running out of water. Is this true?
So that's a massive issue that the country is facing right now. That it's facing a huge water crisis, electricity crisis, gas crisis. And instead of dealing with these issues, the Islamic Republic has been accusing Israel, for example, of moving the clouds, of orchestrating this environmental catastrophe. In reality, this is a result of decades of mismanagement, of corruption.
How serious is this water issue?
It's extremely serious.
Tell us.
So serious that the country's president, Masoud Pezeshkian, announced a few months back that by late September or October, Tehran, the country's capital, could run out of water. Some of the country's major provinces, including up north, which is historically rich with water and all of these resources, by the Caspian Sea, could run out of water. Major dams have been depleted. These are severe issues, and I think this is the kind of thing that will act as a catalyst for people inside Iran to rise up. It's one thing rising up for political, ideological reasons, but when you have no water and you can't sustain yourself, and your government, the regime, isn't caring about this and is instead investing hundreds of millions of dollars in exporting a very dangerous foreign policy that's also very expensive, that's people are going to be upset.
So you think there's hope? Maybe they'll go to Israel, who knows how to get the ocean water into drinking water. What was the relationship with Iran and Israel before 1979? I thought they got along. There's so many Iranian Jews here. Tell us about that.
Well, Israel is a world leader in water technology, and just imagine the kind of collaboration you could have seen with Israel and Iran had there not been so much enmity and had the Islamic Republic not wanted to annihilate the state of Israel quite publicly. But before 1979, the reality was very different. The countries they collaborated on different projects, agricultural, water, academic. And one very interesting example was that in 1962, there was a catastrophic earthquake that took place in the northwest of Tehran, a city called Qasvin. It was a very devastating earthquake. Around 12,000 people were killed and thousands more injured. And the Shah at the time permitted Israel to send a whole team of water engineers to Iran, to advise on rehabilitation efforts, reconstruction efforts. And that was just one example of really decades of this diplomatic collaboration, this relationship that pretty much existed. And let's not forget that Iran was actually the second Muslim majority country after Turkey to recognize the state of Israel in 1950. And that seems like a crazy thing to even consider these days, but the reality pre-1979 was very different to what we see today.
It's not that different. They're really all the same. We are the same. Are there Jewish people still left in Iran?
There are, and it still has remarkably the second largest.
How many people?
There are around 9. Estimates say there are around 9 to 10, maybe as much as 15, as many as 15,000 Jewish people in Iran today, which is the second largest Jewish population in the Middle East. And they are concentrated mostly in Tehran and other city centers, and they're considered by the government as people of the book, monotheistic religions. So they have Hebrew schools, synagogues, they can eat at kosher restaurants. But
there's kosher restaurants in Iran?
There are. Which is incredible. But this all comes at a very serious cost, though. So these people in Iran are able to sort of practice their Judaism freely on the very explicit condition that they have to disavow everything related to Israel, everything related to Zionism. They have to condemn it as a Zionist enemy, as the evil satanic empire, along with the United States, of course.
How do they know if they're doing that?
Well, there are a lot of intimidation campaigns, surveillance, and also combined with that, they also have to pledge loyalty to the Islamic Republic. And so even though there hasn't been a forced program of expulsion in Iran, like in other parts of the Middle East for Jewish people, they've had to live in a constant state of fear. And I think that really started in 1979 when one of the country's major Jewish leaders, his name was Habib El-Ghanian, he was executed. He was the first Jewish person to be executed after the Islamic Revolution in 1979. He was considered to be like the Iranian Jewish Andrew Carnegie at the time. He was a huge philanthropist, a huge businessman, very successful. He introduced the plastics industry to Iran. He was responsible for some of the skyline that you see in Iran today, including the building known as the Plasco building. He was a real leader, industry leader, entrepreneur, and he was executed. And that really, for many people, marked the beginning of the demise for Iran's Jewish community. And at its heyday, there were around 90 to 100,000 Jewish people in Iran. Today, there are around 10,000. Some people, of course, left. My family left also in the 50s. Some left in the 60s, 70s, many more so after the revolution. But many people remain today because maybe for financial reasons they can't leave, but mostly because if you meet Iranians, and of course you have, you'll see that even if they've never been to the country of Iran, they have this unbelievable attachment and loyalty to their country, and they don't want to get rid of that attachment. They want the Islamic Republic to leave Iran. They want to stay attached to Iran. So that's, I think, one of the other reasons driving people to stay. They don't want to leave a country that they love so much.
I don't want to leave New York.
Right.
Let's talk about the recent 12-day war. When we got involved, when President Trump got involved, do you think it was successful?
I think it was necessary. I think this was Israel, after years and years of very careful and thorough intelligence gathering, came to the conclusion that the Islamic Republic was building a very existential plan to destroy the state of Israel and to damage its Western allies. It was on the brink of nuclear capabilities. And not just that, much less spoken about, it was also amassing a massive arsenal of ballistic missiles, devising this extermination plan. And with a country the size of Israel, which you can fit 80 Israels inside Iran, roughly, you can't react to a nuclear attack because it would be too late at that point. So the only necessary response after years of careful thought was a preemptive, careful, calculated and targeted strike to take out some of the nuclear capabilities, to take out military leaders and people who are really dedicated to destroying the state of Israel, to damaging the West, to damaging the United States. And that's a reason why those strikes had to happen. That's why Israel launched its strike, and that's why the United States also subsequently launched Operation Midnight Hammer.
But I asked if you think it was successful, because there's stories that they moved the nukes before and that it really didn't do anything, and they're going to rebuild in just 7 months. It'll be exactly where they were. And the public relations war that we lost. So as an expert, do you think that it was successful?
It depends what metric you're using for success. But if you look at the leadership that was taken out inside Iran, there was a very clear layer of leadership that was taken out. And if you look at the propaganda that's put out by the Islamic Republic, that would also suggest that there were some significant successes carried out, because during the course of the 12-day war, there was a very significant shift in the messaging, the posters that they put out. Before, they had all of these posters and anthems of their might, of their soldiers, and afterwards they had to really change tack because many of the leaders that they advertised and promoted all over their city centres were dead, were taken out, and they shifted to this this hollow nationalism that we saw, where they try to infuse images of pre-1979 pre-Islamic folklore and fuse that with some of the IRGC symbols to sort of create a rally around the flag effect for the people of Iran. But many people inside Iran, from what I'm aware, saw right through it. They saw right through it because up until that point, the Islamic Republic, its supreme leader, its clerical leaders, have really dismissed much of this this pre-Islamic history of Iran, something that is very dear to a lot of people of Iran. But it used that to sort of galvanize the people of Iran. But I think many of them saw through that. I would say that there were significant successes, but the threat of the Islamic Republic remains, of course. They're still hell-bent on destroying the state of Israel. And unfortunately, we also saw a shift in their language. Before, they would say that they're just targeting Israel, and then they started shifting some of their language to targeting Jews, which also includes Jewish people inside Iran, which was why straight after the 12-day war, we saw mass arrests. We saw, up until this point, as many as 20,000 people arrested on suspicion of espionage, collaboration, including some Jewish people. We saw some Kurdish people be executed, and this is a really appalling aftermath of this very necessary attack.
I wonder how much this spills onto New York City, but just bringing us current, yesterday, Israel attacked or tried to take down some of the Hamas leaders in Qatar. And I understand that the Ayatollah is now back in a bunker. So I'm just wondering what the correlation is between what's happening in Qatar, what's the correlation between Hamas here in New York, and if you could connect any of these dots.
I think Israel's messaging has been very clear and very explicit from the outset that anyone who took part, who was responsible, any Hamas leader who was responsible for the appalling atrocities of October the 7th, wherever they are hiding, will face the consequences. And that's what happened yesterday. Israel's strike was not against the state of Qatar, it was against a Hamas stronghold, people who had orchestrated and greenlit a brutal attack that happened, a terrorist attack that happened in Jerusalem just days before, where 6 people were massacred on the streets in a bus in Jerusalem, and that was Hamas claimed responsibility for that, and I'm sure it passed through the approval chain of many of the people who were targeted in Qatar as well. But Israel's war is absolutely not with the people of Qatar, and it's not the same. It goes for the people of Gaza. It's not with the people of Gaza. It's with the Hamas terrorists who have brutalized Israelis and have also brutalized the people of Gaza as well.
How much do you think what's happening in Gaza is affecting the New York City elections? Because the people that I spoke to, even Andrew Cuomo, who was on this show, said that one of the factors of his loss was because of Gaza. And as an expert, do you think that is spilling over to New York? And how much are we being affected about what happens there to us here?
I think it does play a factor because there are many people in New York and in the world who are intimately connected to the events of the Middle East. New York, of course, has the largest Jewish population, for example, outside of Israel. Many people who've got family, they've lost, were affected by October the 7th. And that's why they're so vocal and concerned about this upcoming mayoral election, because I don't think the effect would just remain confined to New York City. It could have much wider implications. And also it's spilling into New York because we've seen so many of these street protests that aren't peaceful by nature, where they're chanting very hateful and dangerous slogans, such slogans that haven't even been condemned really by one of the leading mayoral candidates. I saw a recent interview on MSNBC where I believe Mamdani said he discouraged this kind of language, which is a very sort of passive way of saying you can continue doing it, I might just look the other way. And to say that to something like globalize the Intifada, where we saw almost an attempt by Hamas to recreate a third Intifada in Jerusalem earlier this week, and that's a very dangerous thing to not stamp down. And that's, I think, why so many Jewish people, and also not Jewish, regular New Yorkers, are very concerned, because this could have very dangerous ramifications.
What do you want to say to the Jewish people that are voting for this?
The results of the mayoral election, I think, have to be, of course, decided by New Yorkers, by residents. I hope that anyone who is as deeply concerned and wants to sort of make some change, exercise their right to vote, register in time. And you're an expert in that, and you've been very vocal in helping in informing people how to register. You even told me as a New York City resident that I'm eligible to vote as well. So I hope people exercise their right, however they vote, and sort of take part as opposed to just observe from the sidelines, because they can really have a very major impact in the results.
Do you have a favorite candidate?
I'm not commenting on that at this time, but I will monitor it very closely.
Okay. And how do we find your book? Let me show our audience about this book.
The book is available. It's available for
Unveiled.
Unveiled. It's available for pre-order now at all major retailers, including Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and it comes out on September 25th, which coincides with the 3-year anniversary of Mahsa Amini's death and the start of the massive Women Life Freedom movement. So it's available online now.
I would never have dreamed 24 years later New Yorkers would ever consider electing a mayor that will not denounce globalizing the Intifada. Still, I'm hopeful that New York will be okay, because never bet against New York. I'm Suzanne Miller.